Welcome to the Metaphysical Mindset. I am your host, Elisha Mancini-Caster. Today we have on Coach Tash. She is a yoga instructor, a life coach, astrologer, Reiki practitioner, and Air Force veteran. So today we are going to talk about the balance of masculine and feminine energy.
Thanks for having me.
Awesome. So let's talk a little bit about masculine and feminine energy in your life and how you help others through your coaching practice, your yoga practice, astrology, how you help them create balance in these areas.
Yeah, let's rewind back to the beginning of Coach Tash. So, growing up, it was a little bit interesting for me because I have two brothers, and my father had a really important role in my life when it comes to developing me as a person, and my mom as well. Now, a little caveat as I go into this, what I say about my mother, I want everyone to keep in mind that I love and adore her. And I'm grateful for all the tough lessons that I have acquired through my time here on this planet, and especially when it comes to working with my mom. So my mom was definitely, we all have our own fair share of trauma, and my mom is no different. So when it came to having a daughter was not what she wanted. She wanted boys. And so she definitely raised me like a boy, and I had to be really tough. I actually feel like I was raised tougher than my brothers were raised. And I was very much a tomboy because, again, children want to please their parents. So I was like seeking that love, seeking that approval. I was like, okay, well, you're telling me that you don't want a girl. So therefore, I'm going to be more masculine. And I'm really grateful for my dad because my dad, he was a solid man, but he helped, even though he was very much a manly man. He was a welder and a pipe fitter. You don't get more manly than a construction man. And he helped to soften my edges. So my mom definitely helped to sharpen me, and my dad helped to soften me. So I feel like between the two of them, it was like they were grinding this rock into a diamond. And then, of course, I had to continue that process with myself and through life. But I also had to learn how to balance out my own masculine and feminine energy within. And quite frankly, I'm really grateful that I grew up in the 80s and 90s, and there wasn't all this social pressure to pick a gender. Because if there were, I would be really confused as a teenager. But instead, I knew I was a girl and I was grateful to be a girl, but I also knew that I had to be tough and I had to do in order to, in a sense, be accepted. Even though I'm very much an introvert, I knew that the only way I was going to survive in this world was to develop extroverted qualities.
I think it's really interesting that your father was the one that softened your edges while your mother was the one that sharpened them.
Right. Yeah, absolutely. So moving forward, joining the military. Joining the military, I always knew that I was going to join the military. Ever since I was in elementary school, and we were putting up yellow ribbons. So do you remember when we were doing that? Okay, so I feel like a lot of people would remember that imagery. And I remember I was in the back seat of my mom's car, and I saw the yellow ribbons on the fence, and then we drove past an American flag, and I just started crying. And in that moment, I knew that was like my soul speaking to me saying, hey, yeah, one day we're going to be in the military.
So how did that unfold for you? First of all, where were you stationed? What was that process like? And talk about being a woman in the service.
Yeah, absolutely. I definitely went through the junior ROTC program in high school. And yes, I'm a nerd, and I'm really, like, till this day, I get excited about doing that because I learned so much through the junior ROTC program before joining the military. And then when I did join, I will say that I kind of stuck out like a sore thumb because I already knew how to march. I already knew the chain of command. I already knew the phonetic alphabet. And so that was pretty interesting. And so joining the Air Force, I remember I was 19 years old and I was not scared going through MEPS. I was not scared taking the ASVAB. It was just something that I was doing. And I didn't get scared and nervous until I sat on the plane.
Wow. Okay.
Yeah. And so I was on the plane, my heart started racing and we didn't even take off yet. And I just talked to myself, said, just breathe. You're going to be fine. You don't know what to expect. Of course, this is scary, but we're doing this. So suck it up and fall asleep on the plane and you're going to land in Texas. That's pretty much what I did.
Wow. So you were stationed in Texas?
For basic training is in Lackland Air Force Base, San Antonio.
Okay.
Yeah.
So what was
So,
that? I'm just so interested to hear about how many other women were in the service with you. But what did you see
well,
at boot camp?
basic training, there was a whole dorm of women and there was a lot of us obviously through basic training. But as soon as we separated from basic into tech school is where we learn our specific job that we decided to sign up for. Once I went into my tech school, the number of women dwindled to a smaller pool of us. And then by the time I was at my first base, which turned out to be my only base, because I was there for 6 years, that number shrunk even more. So by the time I arrived at my first squadron, there was one other female in my squadron, but then she didn't stay. I think she left and went to a different squadron shortly after I joined. So I never really had an opportunity to interact with her too much. So when I was on my flight, which is like your own little personal group of people that you're working with, trying to translate into like regular civilian verbiage. So my team, pretty much my team, I was the only female for a while, but then we had 2 other females join my flight after I was there. I believe I was already there on my flight for at least a year before, or half a year, because I did get a roommate, and so maybe I was on the flight. This was a long time ago. We were talking about 2001 through 2007 timeframe. So my timeframes might be off slightly, but I ended up with 2 other females on my flight that stayed with me on my flight for a long time. So 3 females out of a group of 30.
Wow. Okay. And so what was that like? How were you treated? Were you treated any different? Was that a hard time? I have no idea.
Yeah. So when I first joined, I decided I was going to be my normal introverted self. I was really quiet. I didn't say much. I just wanted to absorb everything and be a little bit of a sponge until I knew my job. And yes, I was treated differently. And I didn't know the term good old boy system until I was in the Air Force and experienced it firsthand. Then I learned what the good old boy system was all about. And I just so happened to not be a good old boy. And it is what it is. So there's just certain parts of the military that I was not equipped to fight on my own. And I didn't feel that even if I were to go to through the chain of command on up, that was going to do me any good. So I didn't bother. And what do I mean by that? So my first experience of not being a male in the military, in the Air Force, I qualified for sniper school 3 times. And I outshot every man that I shot up against. And so I qualified, which was fabulous. I was really excited that I qualified. And I thought for sure I was going to have an opportunity to go to sniper school. And I really wanted to go. However, I was not sent any of the times that I qualified. And the last 2 times that I qualified, I was not even told that I qualified for sniper school, but I knew I qualified, and I kind of dug through my own paperwork and found out. So it is what it is. And,
Wow.
but that still provides a lot of learning. And some people are like, okay, well, just because you qualified for sniper school and you didn't get sent and you outshot the gentleman, but do girls even go to sniper school? Yeah, girls do go to sniper school.
So why do you think that you didn't go?
Is a predominantly white culture. And then now I'm in the Air
Oh,
Force in Cheyenne, Wyoming, and the cops there were a handful of Black and maybe a couple of Spanish, but not much, and still predominantly white culture. And so now we're going to throw in the boy system, right? So it's
yeah.
a good old boy system that is it's just in that, it's in the DNA, it's in the makeup of the military. Is it something that I think we can change? I think it's going to take a lot more than me talking about it for it to change. I wouldn't even know where to start with changing something like that. But I did learn a lot about myself in that process. And I think the biggest thing I learned about myself was it doesn't matter. It doesn't matter that I didn't go to sniper school. It doesn't matter that I qualified. What matters is, even if, yes, I wasn't a good old boy. That doesn't matter either. What matters is who I am and what these experiences are refining me into becoming. And it taught me the type of leader that I want to be and the type of leader that I don't want to be.
Ooh, well, expand on that.
One of my favorite higher ups told me when I first joined, and he was my very first supervisor, Sergeant Calderon. I'll never forget this man. He told me, he's like, Natasha or Walker, right? You are going to have good leadership and bad leadership your entire military career. And you have to decide, like learn from both. Don't just say, oh, that's bad and judge it, but learn from it and say, okay, well, that's that, experience, and then learn from the good. And that's that experience without judging either. And then absorb all of it and learn how you can be your own kind of leader.
What great advice.
I agree.
And even in life, I mean, in all areas, if we don't view something as good or bad, we don't become a victim. And then we can just observe and allow that to continue to create who we are. How
Yes.
beautiful. Well, and such an interesting, and I'm sure that helped shape your experience while
It
you were in the
did.
military. Yeah, that's great.
And honestly, the only thing that I can think of outside of that I really get a kick out of is females make a better sniper makes a great title for an article.
It really does. That's good. Oh, I really like that. So, what happened after you left the military?
So after I left the military, well, it was 2007. And back then I knew I wanted to be a life coach. However, I knew I was searching online. I found the information for CTI and I found the information for the ICF, the International Coaching Federation.
Hmm.
And I felt like the ICF, especially their website, was so confusing back in 2007. I was like, what is this? Is this a school? Is this like a room body? I couldn't tell. And I couldn't find back then, because their website was not user friendly. It's better now. Back then it wasn't so good. Like I couldn't find a list of schools. And I was like, okay, well, this is like, I couldn't sort out what schools were the good schools to go to, which ones were fly by night schools. I didn't want to just go to like a weekend warrior kind of school and get a half certification. I wanted to make sure that if I was going to invest in an education, that it was going to be a quality education. And so I decided to put a pin in that idea, or that for a moment. I was going to come back to it later. So I decided to get my bachelor's in psychology first and foremost, because no matter what, if I was going to be a coach or a therapist, bachelor's in psychology is a great place to start. And then after that, while I was in my last year of my degree program as an adult learner, which is obviously another whole podcast in itself, I was wrapping up my bachelor's in psychology when I I finally found like the school I wanted to go to. But I got there through a teacher that I had through my bachelor. She was a therapist and a coach. And so she talked to me a little bit more about the ICF website. And so it convinced me to revisit it. So I revisited the site and found the list of schools. And from there, I knew I wanted to focus on like positive psychology. And that was like my only focus. I was like, know positive psychology is the way I want to go and I want to move forward. And I found a school that focuses on positive psychology. So I went through Mentor Coach, which is a fabulous school. And when I went through, it was definitely I'm a little bit slower when it comes to absorbing information. So I take a little bit longer than most people, but then when I come on the other side, I tend to have a stronger grasp of the knowledge and the information. So it did take me 2 years to finish the program, but then I ended up going back and I worked for the school for about 4.5 years.
So tell me about your current project that you're doing that has to do with your military experience.
So my current project is letters to my younger self. And the first series that I'm working on is the military series. So with letters to the younger self, I am giving my younger self advice. So like speaking to the self, but it's not for me. It's for anyone that can relate or anyone that is like looking to join the military. It's just like if I were younger, or excuse me, if I were to speak to my 19-year-old self, what would I have wanted to know back then that nobody told me? What didn't the recruiter tell me? What was the truth about the military?
Oh, I love that. That's so great. So in this series that you're doing, what are some other, I know you're saying your military experience, what are some other letters to your younger self that you're doing?
I know they're called letters to the younger self, but they're all videos. I just like that title. They popped in my head. I was like, yeah, I'm totally using it. When I was 15, I was abandoned. And I know a lot of people are going to hear that and be like, oh my gosh, that's so awful. In reality, that was the best thing that ever happened to me in my entire life. If you think about it, you're 15 years old. Yeah, I had to go through plenty of years of therapy. So don't get me wrong, but I didn't have an adult to tell me no, to tell me I can't do or I can't be something. And from that moment forward, I was unrestricted, unplugged, and I was able to shape my life in any way that I saw fit for me. And so in that regard, it was the best thing that ever happened to me. And I wasn't the only 15-year-old that was homeless. There are plenty of kids that live on the streets. There are plenty of kids that have to couch surf or living at their best friend's house. Speaking to the 15-year-old self is letters to younger folks that need to know that they're not alone. How can they turn a seemingly negative experience into a positive? And that's the point of all of the letters. If it's military, if it's abandonment, if it's this, if it's that, it's about how can we look at something that looks to the outside world as negative, but what was the hindsight? What was the positive learning lesson from that experience? So even like with what I was talking about with the military and the good old boy system, I'm not upset about it. And instead, it just taught me more of the internal layers of my own psyche.
But I'm sure there were times in your life where you were upset about that.
Yes, and I had to work through it. I did. So I definitely got into reading self-help books in Barnes and Nobles before it was cool. So I was hiding in the corner so no one could see me. And even in the military, it wasn't a cool thing to read self-help books. So I would hide the books that I was reading. But yeah, I started reading tons and tons of books, starting with the age of 15 on how to like heal the self.
And I know you talk sometimes about quieting the mind.
In life, it's so easy. This is I'm going to tie this 15-year-old self back into quieting the mind. So as an adult, it is so easy for people to give you their opinions, right? Opinions are like assholes. Everybody's got one. And now let's throw in work. And now people are telling you what to do and all these things. And sometimes it can get really, really noisy. Like, there was a point in time where recently that I asked, do I love coaching? Do I still want to be a coach? I unplugged. I unplugged from everything that I needed to unplug. I kept my current coaching clients, and then I stopped taking on new coaching clients. I'm like, I need to figure out, what do I really want to do? Is it coaching? Is it astrology? Is it Reiki? Is it yoga? What is it? And I did walk away from the coaching school. Not that they are absolutely amazing school, but there are too many voices at that school in my head too about what kind of coach I needed to be. And I wasn't sure if I love coaching anymore. So in yoga, we say, if you like get disconnected from your practice, it's time to step away from teaching. So I stepped away from teaching coaching and really did a deeper dive of myself. And I always ask myself, if I need to quiet my mind, is what would my 15-year-old self say to me right now? And sometimes it is important for us to lean into younger, braver versions of us that had less chatter. And sometimes it's important for us to lean into those future versions of us that have more wisdom. So I go back and forth with that. But my younger self, I adore her. 15 years old, brave as all get out. She was ready to conquer the world. And her only focus was stay in school and keep moving forward, keep putting one foot in front of the other. I don't want to disappoint her ever. Like, she was so brave. How can I, as an adult, disappoint her now by not fully diving deep and figuring out, who am I now and what do I want my life to look like from this moment moving forward? And so that's what I had to do with quieting my own mind so I can hear myself think again and hear from, like, I see my soul perspective. And I've asked my soul, I like to use that word because I literally said, soul, what is it that we want to do now? Why am I here on this planet? How could I move forward in order to achieve whatever it is that I'm here to achieve on this planet? And so by using the word soul, it gets me out of my ego mind, who thinks it knows everything, and brings me into a bigger perspective of, okay, yeah, I am in this temporary body on this planet right now for a reason and a season. So what am I going to do with this life? Am I going to sit here and I was very depressed. Am I going to sit here and stay depressed? Or am I going to figure out, what do I want to do with my life moving forward?
Absolutely. And it's so, I think everyone can relate to that feeling. I know when I was 20 years old, I lived in Canton, Ohio, and I had the same situation, not the same situation as being homeless and having that, but I could hear everyone else's desires for me about what they thought I should do and what they thought I'd be good at and which direction I should go. And I remember all I could think of was, I have to get out of here. And I didn't really know then. And I remember saying, it wasn't so clear to me, but I remember saying, I feel too big for this space and I need to get out so I can hear myself.
Yeah.
And then I moved to Florida. And once I got there, I started to kind of figure out what I enjoy, what I like, and it always brings to mind that Julia Roberts movie where she was the runaway bride and
Yeah.
she was going to marry all those men that she left at the altar, but she didn't know how she liked her eggs.
Yep.
And then it came to that question at the end with her new lover, what kind of eggs do you like? And she finally figured it out. And I think that happens, yes, in big ways, in these big life-changing ways, but then also just in these tiny little ways of, sometimes it's like another layer of the onion. Oh my gosh, I do that because my mom always did it, not because I want to do it.
Right.
or because someone told me to do it and that's just what you should do. And then finally you kind of shed that off. That's not me. That's another voice in my head. So I do just have to ask this about your 15-year-old self, about you in a literal sense. Where were you living? How was that? Were you in a shelter when your mom walked away from you? Were you at a bus stop? Share with us what happened there.
No, I was actually very, very blessed. My mom, very intelligent, and she divided and conquered. So she, like a week prior to her leaving, she had this planned out. Let me backtrack a little bit further back. Okay, let's start. This is sophomore year of high school. I had just started my sophomore year of high school, and I came home one day and the house was empty. Dun, dun, dun. So
Sure.
my brother got home first before me, and he is freaking out. And we're 17 months apart. So we're not that far off in age. And he's like, oh my gosh, she left us. She always said she was going to leave us, and she really did. And I just like, I'm really good under pressure and in crisis situation. And for those of you that love astrology, I am moon in Capricorn. So that is no surprise. My brother, and I'll explain that later, my brother is moon in Cancer. So he's a little bit more sensitive when it comes to, being hurt within the heart. And versus me, where I can totally take it. I'm like, yeah, bring it. It's okay. I got this. I actually function at my my highest level when the world is falling apart and I'm super cool, calm, and collected. I can just focus. And so I was like, okay, just calm down. We're going to figure this out. Don't worry. And internally in my head is another story, but externally, that's what the world sees. Next thing you know, he's breathing. My mom pulls around with the U-Haul. She has the black Camaro on the back of the U-Haul, and then my dad is driving his truck. And so she's like, hop in. I'm like, all right. Actually, I think I had that wrong. Maybe that was backwards. I feel like we were I feel like the truck was on the back of the U-Haul. It's been so long. And then my mom was driving the Corvette Camaro, black Camaro. It's Camaro. I always get Corvettes and Camaros confused sometimes. So there was like 3 kids, 3 dogs in this black small car driving up to Tennessee. And this is back in, I guess we'll end up revealing a little bit more about like why there's a little bit more chaos. Now, this might blow some people's minds, but it is what it is. And we can have a whole nother discussion on this another time. But this was back in 97. Back in 97, anyone that had an illegal business was closing up shop because the feds were rolling through South Florida. So if you were dealing cocaine, if you were a madam, which my mom was a madam, any type of illegal operation, everyone closed their businesses down because they knew the feds were rolling through. And a lot of people got arrested in 1997 and got sent to the federal penitentiaries. And so we just had to hightail it out of there. And we ended up in the projects in downtown Nashville, which those were the projects that we were born into. And a lot of people, when they look at me, they think I come from like a perfect cookie cutter background, but nobody knows where anybody comes from unless if we share. And not many of us do share where we come from unless if there's like a reason to share the context of the stories. And I do feel like there is a reason to share this. I feel like if anybody is struggling with like their life circumstances, number one, our world lately says it's okay to be a victim and sit there and stay there. And I'm here to say it's not okay to be a victim. It doesn't matter the background that you come from. You can turn your life into anything that you want it to be, anything that you choose it to be. So it's completely up to you. All right. So now we're in the projects, and we were there for a little while, but then there was a lot of drug use, and my mom wasn't happy with the drug use around us. So you might say, well, she was a madam. So why? And for those of you that don't know what a madam is, it's a female pimp. And so why would a madam care if there's drugs around her kids? Well, she did. And she was actually a really good mom to the best of her ability. And just because she was a madam, that lifestyle did not enter the home. It stayed outside of the home. My brothers didn't find out what my mom did for a living until that year. I knew what my mom did for a living ever since elementary school, but females are a little bit more perceptive than men, no offense, men. And I did walk in a lot of other conversations that she was having on the phone prior to that. So I knew pretty much my entire life. And she made sure to tell me I had certain lies I had to tell the school teachers what my mom did for a living if they ever asked. And so I always had a list of different occupations to share. So we ended up going to Laverne High School for 2 months in Tennessee. So we went from the projects to my grandma's house, went to Laverne High School, and I was really excited to be there because there was like a small country school, and we're the only mixed babies there. So therefore very popular. It was actually kind of an interesting experience. And they had another ROTC program. So of course I joined it. And it was the Army ROTC program. And so not only did I get an opportunity to experience the Air Force Junior ROTC program, but also the Army. And both experiences were phenomenal. And I know I'm geeking out over like high school like activities, but it was a lot of fun. And I got to learn how to spin a rifle in the Army Junior ROTC program. So I did definitely join the drill team on both the Air Force and the Army side. But then, of course, now here we come to the disaster that blew up in the face, right? So now we went from grandma's house to living in a hotel, which going like bouncing around like this is nothing new. And I can't tell you how many hotels throughout my childhood we end up living in tents and cars and whatever. So I got really good at like learning how to be homeless. So all these skills, I feel like they are skills that were developed through some tough situations. And so now my parents get into an argument. And of course, my mom blew things out of proportion. And I felt so bad for my dad because I can't tell you how many times I had to watch my favorite man in the world, the strongest man ever, keep in mind, a construction worker, a welder, and a pipe fitter. He could also lay concrete and do roofing and all these extra things that, really like construction workmen can do. My mom broke him multiple times. And every time she broke him, she would always like leave him with an empty home with nothing but like his lunchbox and his clothes and his paperwork, and take everything else, including the kids, all furniture. Everything was gone. And so this is no different. This time she left him in a hotel room and she hightailed it back to Florida with 3 kids and 3 dogs. And she did get an efficiency right outside of my school because I was adamant that I have to be in school no matter what. Well, this is only 2 months later. We were only gone for 2 months. I went back to school, no problem. The school had no clue that I was even gone. My mom never signed me out. So none of this was ever done properly. I had to sign myself back into school and have them transfer the records myself from one school to the other for the additional work that I did for the 2 months. So they knew that I didn't drop out. And so I'm back in school and I could walk to school. We had an efficiency, and an efficiency is just like a 1-bedroom, small little space by the school. And I was there just a couple of days. My mom asked me, hey, would you mind asking your best friend if you can stay with her and her parents for a while? Because I'm going to take the boys and we're going to go sleep in a tent at Johns Prince Park. And that's a famous, like a park that a lot of homeless sleep in. And she didn't want me there because I'm a female. And in that regard, I was really grateful. So that was really good. And so I asked Courtney, and her mom and her stepdad said, yes, I can stay with them. And she asked if I could slumber party. So that's the words we used. So I was at Courtney's house for a week, and then my mom pulls up, in her black car, and she rolls down the window. I remember seeing her. She was like, she pulls up. She had already called. And so I met her outside. And my mom is very particular in like her wording and what she says and how she says it. She's always been meticulous about this. This way, she's never in the wrong. The 2 questions I was asked was, do you want to stay in school or do you want to help me run my business? And I already knew what kind of business she was in. And I always wanted to stay in school because my dad, it's still in the back of my head, stay in school, no babies. Right. So I wanted to stay in school. That was my answer. To me, that was a no-brainer. I was like, oh yeah, I aced this one. I want to stay in school. It's like, no problem. Turned around, drove away. And that was the day that I realized that it still didn't hit me in that moment. So I walked back inside to the house and I told Courtney's mom what my mom said. She said, no problem. Go into Courtney's room and just close the door. And she talked to her husband, and they agreed that they were going to keep me and allow me to stay there with them. So I was very blessed.
Oh, that's awesome. And so you stayed in school
Stayed in school.
and you were
Yep.
able
And
to.
I did. I was able to bounce back and forth between Courtney had 4 parents. She had 2 moms and 2 dads. She's a child of divorce, but her parents did really well, in my opinion, as outside looking in, as keeping her able to like bounce back and forth pretty easily. They lived in the same neighborhood. So we'd walk from her mom's house to her dad's house.
Oh, wow.
Yeah.
Oh,
And
that's
then
great. So they just took you in.
they took me in. Yep. I was there up until 17. And then at 17, I ended up living with my boyfriend and his mom for a while. And then from there, straight to college.
Okay. And so, and where did you go to college? Was it local?
Nope. I was 19 and a brat. And I went to Johnson Wales University in Rhode Island because, down here in South Florida, we're always told that northern schools are more advanced and ahead of the rest of us, or northern schools are ahead of Florida, and the Florida school system sucks. And that's what we're like pounded into our heads over and over and over again. But the one thing that I didn't take into consideration, I had to fight for my education my entire life. To include, this started in like elementary school. So I definitely, again, I'm going to see some labels that were placed on me, but I don't choose to see them as labels, but see them as gifts and opportunities to become better and to strive for more. So of course I was labeled as like a slow learning disability child. And it took me longer to learn how to read and to understand the value of reading. But then once I did, I definitely did really, really well in school.
It's interesting thinking about what happened to you when you were taken away from that masculine presence in your life and how you reconnected with that, how that, I don't know if you want to get into how that gap ended up presenting itself and how you filled that gap and how you, because when there's that absence, was there that replacement with your friend Courtney's parents? How did you reconnect with that masculine part of yourself or view that masculine part of yourself? Or was it straight to the military and that was, you know what I'm saying?
Well, I feel like the masculine took over. As soon as she left, the masculine took over within me.
As soon as your mom left?
Yes, absolutely. Because I wasn't raised to be feminine. Like, yeah, I was okay if I wore some makeup or whatever, but I was raised to be tough. So I know that in our society, girls are raised to be polite, to be quiet, to be good mothers, to be good wives. And I was always raised to have no kids. And I know my dad said that in jest most of the time, but he was also very serious. He wanted me to finish school. He always told me that don't get pregnant and have to depend on a man. Like, learn how to be you and stand on your own feet. And then when you want to have kids, then you have kids if you want to have kids. He always told me that don't get pregnant and have to depend on a man. Like, learn how to be you and stand on your own feet. And then when you want to have kids, then you have kids if you want to have kids. But my first, like, coming back to the masculine within me was really conditioned since early childhood. Because masculine, if you think of masculine energy, it's active, forceful energy or just active energy, period. Active energy that's out in the world, feminine energy, a little bit more receptive. So would just, would you send a 5-year-old into a bank by themselves to take their rolled coins to the teller to get dollar bills?
No.
Yes. And for me, I didn't have a choice. She's like, "Oh, you want your money to be in dollar bills?" And so, of course, when you were kids, you collect coins, right? And then you roll them and take them to the bank. So I had to take my coins into the bank by myself and give it to the teller, and the teller getting cash back. And then I go back out to the car. And to me, I was like, okay, I didn't know any better. Obviously, I'm like a kid. And I didn't know that that was not okay to send like a little kid into the bank by themselves. But I had to do a lot of things on my own because that's what she wanted me to do. And as kids, we want to please our peers. Like, okay, so I guess I have to learn how to do this now. Okay, I guess I have to learn how to do this now. And then to include, like when I was wanting to join the junior ROTC program, and you start selecting that from middle school. My mom said, I'm not going to help you get it in. I'm not going to do anything for you. If you want to do it, then do all the paperwork, tell me where to sign, and you do it. All right. And she's from Missouri, and she would sarcastically always say, and I always drove me nuts, I'm from the show me state. You got to show me. I'm like, all right, no problem. So at a certain point, if you keep telling a child they have to show you, at a certain point, they're going to stop asking for permission and they're just going to do. And that's who I am now. It's like, I just do. Sometimes I do, and I make a lot of mistakes, and then I learn from them. Sometimes I regret them, but you still learn from them. And then there like came a point that here's where the feminine ties in. I didn't know how to be feminine. I didn't know how to be receptive. And so my entire life, it was go, 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 do, 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 be a bulldozer. And then it was back in like 2016, 2017. I know some people might roll their eyes at this next one, but I had a psychic reading, and this psychic told me, or medium, she more than likely was probably a medium, but she told me that it was time for me to stop trying to do so much and push forward, but it was time for me to sit back and learn how to be, and to be a little bit more open, be more receptive, be more feminine. And that was really, really hard for me. But then I was able to. It became easier and easier. And I do feel like, teaching yoga helps a lot with that. And even life coaching helps with that, because you have to be open to like being a vessel instead of being an expert and knowing all the answers. And Reiki helps with that as well, because you have to open and again, be that vessel. But then that became a crutch also. And then I had to learn how to balance out the masculine and feminine within me. So I couldn't always go and go and go and do and do and do. But then I couldn't also just lean into doing nothing, or what felt like nothing to me. Like, because I was getting like really depressed, leaning on either side too much. So I believe it was like when we were having a conversation, something clicked in my head that I had to balance out the masculine and the feminine within me. And so I like to imagine like Johnny Rocket. And I know I'm taking that like an old school reference and bringing it back, but Johnny Rocket was a cartoon, and he would have this jetpack. And I would imagine having that jetpack on, and at the bottom in the back, down by my low lumbar, I imagine having two gauges. One's a masculine gauge, one's a feminine gauge. And then in my mind, I imagine the arrows pointing to like they're both even, instead of always leaning into the masculine or always leaning to the feminine. How can they both be even and have even distribution of fuel? So I can move forward from a solid feminine place, but also take the action and bring that masculine energy into this world. So, yeah.
I think that's beautiful. And I can feel that when you're saying that, I can tap into that energy of having the masculine and feminine and just allowing them to live in harmony together in my body. I can feel that in my spine. And I think really for as busy as we continue to get in our culture, and we put all these things on our list of things to do, I think it's so important to allow ourselves to let that feminine energy come in and create space for us to
Right.
process everything that we're going through. So many people are just going, going, going. I don't have to tell you that.
Right.
Your life has been really interesting. I can't help but notice. I mean, both of your parents. So I can imagine them having really strong, powerful arguments because they were both holding so much masculine energy.
Yeah. The arguments were fireworks.
Yeah. So I do think we should go into one more thing.
Okay.
Um, on the topic of feminine energy, it's so interesting that you are internally dealing with, and I think a lot of us are, but internally dealing with that, bringing that feminine energy into balance. Because in our culture right now, in our society, the feminine energy is continuously being squashed.
Yeah.
And I can't help but, like, just in light of recent activities, I feel as though feminine energy is continuing to be overlooked and viewed as not being powerful. And I know you talked about that a little bit, kind of being quiet and just sitting there and allowing this masculine energy to push us around. Not that we don't need it, the masculine energy has its place, but how, I guess I'm asking, how do you view your inner connection with your outer connection currently?
If my internal state is jacked up, my external world shows me it's jacked up. And so if I want to change my external world, I always have to go within first and say, okay, where am I at right now? I do like a check in. Am I not doing enough? Am I doing too much? So if I'm not doing enough, I'm leaning to my feminine too much. If I'm doing too much, I'm leaning to my masculine too much. And then I have to ask myself, okay, well, which one do I need to lean into right now? Do I need them both in balance? Sometimes I need to be out of balance in order to come back into the space of equilibrium. I know it doesn't sound like it makes sense, but it actually works. So as an example, the past 4.5 years, I was leaning into too much of my feminine energy and not enough of my masculine energy. So I wasn't doing enough. And so, in order for me to kind of kickstart and jump out of too much feminine, I had to really dive into that masculine. But before diving into that masculine, I had to go into the internal and say, okay, what is it? This is where I come back to the soul question. What is it that I need? What does my soul want me to do right now? And like kind of coming from that higher perspective yet again. And my soul is amazing because my soul always, tells me exactly the next step. And my soul for me communicates through happy tears. So when I know I'm going in the right direction, I just start crying. I'm happy. I'm like these happy tears, like, all right, this is it. So for me, it's like a no-brainer and it's really easy to know. But it took a long time just to, number one, recognize that I can ask my soul directly. And then I can also receive directly information from that space.
Well, yeah, and you were talking about your personal connection inward and then outward, how
Mhm.
you're seeing that and how that's all connected, how your internal world reflects out and vice versa. I think that's beautiful. And what came to mind for me was an exercise that I used to do in classes. I haven't done it in a long time, but I'm kind of sitting here thinking, oh, I'd like to you take out colored pencils and paper and you spend some time working on your feminine energy and what that would look like. And then you spend some time working on the masculine energy. And usually I'm listening to Hemi sync. So I'm syncing up both hemispheres because they're so representative of those qualities in us. And I'm sitting here thinking, oh yeah, I would love to do that. And what usually ends up happening when you do this exercise with people is that the masculine energy comes out in blues and greens and those, and we represent it in colors, but there's usually like shapes like triangles, sharp corners, all of that. And then I know, and then the feminine energy, like your purple swirls kind of, and it kind of reminds me of DNA, how they're swirled like, but anyways, that's usually the exercise that we do. That might be what triggered my thought of my memory of that. But then it's so nice to come back to that and allow that piece of art to continue to speak to us. I know some people would frame them, and I have a really nice, I'm going to have to go dig that up now. But interesting. This has been a really interesting conversation about masculine and feminine energy. Is there anything else you would like to say on this topic?
Astrology taught me more about myself and my own masculine energy.
Mm,
Um, and in my chart is riddled with masculine energy all over the
mm.
place. And I, when I actually never thought I was going to ever be an astrologer. I actually, when I was younger, yeah, I started where we all start in like high school and middle school, learning about your zodiac sign. And we all get that first book with the sun on it, and it says like your birthday or whatever that first initial big giant book is that we all read. And I stopped there because I was thinking, oh, it's just like personality stuff. And after a while, I get bored with just personality tests and all these things, right? Like, all right, just something else telling me who the world thinks I am. But I was so wrong, and I so misjudged astrology. And I'm grateful that I feel like spirit's guided me my whole life. And I know that spirit guided me to astrology as well. I remember I was in the car driving. This was pre 2020, and I was listening to this astrologer on YouTube, and I was like, "Why the hell am I listening to this BS?" And then I just heard the spirit in my head just saying, "Just listen." I'm like, "Okay, fine, I'll just listen." And that's typically how it happens with spirit and I. There's like, "Just do it, Natasha." I'm like, "All right, fine, I'll listen." And I kept listening until we get to November 2019, and five different astrologers, two different YouTube channels. One of them was Chris Brennan on the astrology podcast. The other was Heather Eland on Astrology with Heather on YouTube. And they were all talking about a possible airborne disease, a possible no hugging situation, and the China birth chart. November
Wow.
2019. And I said, okay, this sounds pretty crazy. If something happens in 2020 that's reflective of those keywords, I'm going to take astrology courses and dive deeper. And so, true to form, I did.
I remember that. I
Yeah.
remember when you were going through that. And then I felt like you were in courses for a long time.
Yes. Yes. And I'm still not done with Chris Brennan's course. His course is intense. It's like thousands of hours of video, and I love it though. I'm just like gobbling it all up. And so, as it was actually kind of interesting for those that are listening that are like already astrologically inclined, as Saturn was in Aquarius for me, was when I just couldn't absorb enough astrology information. But then what was interesting, as soon as Jupiter dipped into Aries, my focus shifted from astrology to comedy. Yeah. And even though I still love, astrology, and I still dive in to like learning something new every single day, I noticed Jupiter's back in Aries, and my focus shifted to, all right, let's improve and let's move forward. So I do have more coming out that is reflective of this Jupiter and Aries energy. And now Saturn is in Pisces. I know I'm talking over your head right now, but I can totally
Okay.
break this down later. Now with Saturn in Pisces, there is Saturn forcing me, yes, to continue this deep internal growth and healing, but to also now share it with the world and say, okay, Natasha, you've been an introvert long enough. You've been behind the scenes long enough. Now let's go and present and do and help somebody.
100%. And you grew so much. Oh my gosh. from the first time you ever did a reading, read my chart until the last time was wild. But I love it because of your coaching and all of your education in psychology. I love how it just gets pulled in there because I'm always asking, well, how does this affect me? What can I do? And you're just the full package. I think that's beautiful. I love it. So is there, before we go, anything you want to say astrologically? Do you want to give us any little
Yeah.
something to look forward to or for the rest of 2023 anyway? Um, any any advice or offering?
Yeah. I would say embrace Saturn, quite frankly. So we have Saturn in Pisces. And number one, Pisces is an energy that can dissolve boundaries. And Saturn is a planet of boundaries. And Saturn wants us to learn how to deal with life through the grind of life, through the hard knocks of life. Like Saturn throws all the punches. And, you know, in our world today, it's rewarded to be the victim. And Saturn's like, there's no victim up in here. So instead of saying, okay, the world gave me this label and I'm going to own this label. As an example, I believe I was going to go into this earlier, but I stopped myself. My mom always held herself back when it comes to education. She's like, I'm dyslexic. I can't read. I can't do this. And that I saw that so much in my life that really irks my hide. And so I'm also dyslexic. I'm also a slow learner. It takes me a lot longer than most people to like absorb information. And I have to like pound it and pound it and pound it and pound it. But that's the difference between me and a lot of the people is I embrace Saturn, the discipline of repetition. And, you know, some people look at me like, Tasha, you're crazy. You get up at 4 or 5 in the morning. Why? You go to the gym? What? That's Saturn. That's the discipline, right? So if you can embrace the discipline that Saturn's asking you to embrace, then this year is going to be easier for you. But if you choose to play the victim and be in that role, this year is going to be the worst year, worse than 2020 for you, because Saturn in Pisces is not going to take it easy on us. Granted, Saturn has to play by Jupiter's rules. Jupiter is going to try to like buffer Saturn out a little bit, but we have Neptune up in there. And honestly, it's like my opinion of Saturn, Neptune, and Saturn, Neptune, and Pisces. It's like if you don't lean into your own discipline and make yourself the person that you choose to be, then you're going to lean into escapism. So you're going to lean into, let's binge watch TV too much. Let's lean into food, drugs, alcohol, all these things that make you feel better and absorb all this negative just to fill a void, when instead Saturn's asking you to heal some things. And this is going to be some deep healing over these next 3 years. But only for those that choose it. If you don't choose your own healing, then you're going to be choosing your own pain. So it's like, okay, if you have to choose a pain, what pain would you pick for yourself? The pain of dealing with healing right now, or the pain of someone else controlling you and your life in the future, or
Oh, that's
something else?
powerful. Oh, that's powerful. I love that. Oh, well, thank you for leaving us with that. I think that is great advice. I've definitely seen that come through in my life. So it's definitely representative of what I've been going through and what people that I around are going through. There is this call to, and I just know a couple people that have stopped doing things, behaviors that aren't healthy for them and that are negative, and they are feeling so good. And the momentum, I think when we stop those behaviors, the momentum to move forward, it's been night and day. There's a happiness there that I haven't seen in a long time. So I can totally see what you're saying. So Coach Tosh, I am loving the new direction that you're, well, not new direction, but the somewhat new direction that you're businesses going in. I know you've been a yoga instructor for a really long time, and you've been a life coach for a long time. And I love the astro coaching because I've had that experience with you and it's beautiful. And I just love it. So let's talk a little bit about how all of these modalities are kind of merging, and share with us about how your coaching and your astrology kind of, I mean, I feel like you just were guided into astrology with, you were just kind of enjoying it. And then it became this wonderful way to help guide people and help people. And now it's just, I don't want to say taking over your coaching, but it seems like it's really blended very well. So talk a little bit, share with us about that.
Yeah, absolutely. So the yoga, I I don't work in a traditional like yoga studio. I go to treatment centers, or can't speak, treatment centers and detoxes for drug and alcohol addiction. And that particular population is near and dear to my heart. I feel like they are like my soul family, and I absolutely love working in treatment. And so I know a lot of people have asked me for a long time, when are you going to stop teaching yoga and just do coaching? And the answer is whenever spirit says. And right now, spirit says I'm meant to stay in that world, and I'm all about it because so many people need a light source. And so it's like treatment centers, you come in and you feel like you're dark. And then you do a meditation, you're like, I can see the light. And so a lot of people need that. And so the yoga and the meditation is what I do there.
And I have to
And
ask too, how has Reiki influenced
mhm,
your yoga instruction?
honestly, I remember when I first started teaching and treatment, and I made a pact with spirit. I make pacts with spirit. Like, okay, spirit, if you want me to do this, this is what has to happen, kind of thing. And I don't know if many other people do that, but I've done that my whole life. And
It's good to do. It's boundaries, even with them, for sure.
yeah.
Yeah, yeah.
So I've always said, like, if somebody wants me to do Reiki, they have to ask me. I'm not going to just tell them I can do it. But this was before you attuned me to Reiki. And because I've been doing healing touch since I was a child. And before meeting you and being educated by you, I thought they were the same thing. I had no clue that they're different. And I remember I used to like poo poo, oh, Reiki, that's nonsense. People paying money for someone to do what I do since I was a kid. And my ego was very inflated. So I definitely like spirit humbled me a lot in order for me to be even attuned to Reiki. And so with the energy healing that I was doing, I could feel within my body where someone's chakras was blocked, or I would see a color of which chakra was blocked. And now with the Reiki, it's way more intense, and it's on a whole nother level. So not only do I hold space for the energy of Reiki to flow through me, but because of the attunements, I am a deeper channel, and more information just kind of pours out of me. So what I typically tell people is when I'm holding the space for Reiki to flow through me, which is energy healing, at the same time, I have a circle protection around me at all times. I'm only connected to high vibing of energy. And I'm so funny. My grandma is the gatekeeper to my circle of energy of protection. So I have my spirit guides and I have my grandma, and then sometimes my dad will join. But my grandpa has joined quite a bit, and then I have an aunt that has joined and a grandmother that two. So I have two grandmothers that have joined, but the one grandma is on my mom's side, and she's the gatekeeper. Like she's around me constantly. And so how this works is like my circle of protection, my grandma has to approve the energy that wants to come in and give me information. And so as I'm holding space for people, then I do get sometimes their loved ones coming through. And it's not like I'm this really well developed and refined medium or anything right now, but I can tell if it's masculine or if it's feminine, and they give me images and they'll give me smells. I still get feelings in my body. I still get colors. They'll give me like scenery, and I just share whatever information is coming through. And I always tell people, I'm not in control of who comes through or what comes through. I'm just sharing what I'm being given, and I'm holding space and not judging it. And so I'm just sharing this information with you. And then once we're done, you can tell me how it resonates with you, because I don't know. And I always tell them before we start, don't tell me anything about you, because I don't want them to tell me something about themselves personally, and then now I'm judging it. Was that what they told me, or is this coming from spirit? Because I still can't distinguish right now. And so I prefer to not know anything about the person and just let the information kind of roll through. And everyone that I've worked with, they've had pretty profound experiences. I'm also an observer. So I tell people that I'm no one special. I'm just like like everyone, and anyone can do what I do. It's just that some of us have opened up a little bit more to receive. So I'm just a radio. I'm a radio that receives a wave, and then I just share it. And then when you tell me how it sits with you, now I get to be, kind of a part of that experience too. Otherwise, I don't know anything.
Beautiful. I love it. Talk a little bit about coaching
Mhm.
and astrology.
First, coaching. Let's start there. So I'm a life coach first and foremost, and um, I do want to make a quick caveat that, a lot of people nowadays are on the internet saying, I'm a coach, I'm a coach, I'm a coach, thanks to 2020. Everybody and their mother is now saying that they're a coach. But in reality, they really should be saying they're a consultant. So a lot of us that go through training to be coaches have to choose. Do I want to be a life coach, or do I want to be niched out? Now, the difference between a life coaching and a niched out coach. Life coaching, no matter what you do, if you're a life coach, an executive coach, a health and wellness coach, it doesn't matter. You're still going to have to do life coaching at the end of the day. But the niched out coaches have the extra ability to give their expert opinion or expert advice because of their niche. So, say for instance, if they're a health and wellness coach and they have all this health and wellness training, so it's almost like being a personal trainer and a coach with that knowledge wrapped into one, without having to actually go to the gym and work out with people. So that's the nice part. So yeah, a niched out coach definitely coaches somebody through questions. And the whole point of coaching is to help that individual pull out their own awareness from within versus being told what to do. And that is such the common misconception in our world today, that life coaches tell you what to do. And that's not true. I've turned away clients because they're like, I just want you to tell me what to do. Well, if you're not willing to do the work, I'm not willing to work with you. I come from a no bullshit background, so I accept no bullshit clients. And it is what it is. They can go work with someone else that just wants to take their money and just do action coaching. That's not me. I'm an awareness coach. I'm going to make you dig deep. I'm going to make you dig into those uncomfortable places that you don't want to go. And I'm going to actually help you move your life forward, because that's what coaching is about. Coaching is not about me telling you what to do and you having a temporary fix and then being back here in 6 months because you didn't fix anything. And so, yes, I'm a life coach first and foremost. And I absolutely have realized that I love coaching, and I just had to find my own voice again.
And so astrology,
Mhm.
going into that, well, making astrology a part of that really with your astro coaching. How did this
Yes.
develop?
How did it develop? Oh my goodness. It developed, well, it kind of started, as weirdly as this is going to sound, it started in the treatment centers.
Did
So
it?
as I would drive to these treatment centers, I would listen to astrology. And then I would be doing yoga or individual stretch therapy, depending on what we were doing for the day. And the clients were like, do you know about like my zodiac sign? And I thought was kind of random because that's how it starts, right? Spirit kind of forces me into things, into my new things. Just like I said, I told Spirit that someone has to ask me if I do Reiki in order for me to do Reiki. Therefore, I do it now. Spirit did the same thing with astrology. They're like, all right, ask her if she knows what this is. And so that was great because I was like, yeah, I can tell you about your zodiac sun sign. And then I would start explaining what a Cancer was, what an Aquarius was, what an Aries was. And by just verbally talking it through while doing my regular yoga job, I was able to teach and retain more information. So it's like when we teach something, we learn something better. And so that's where it kind of started. And then it kind of snowballed from there. And now I read charts. I love astrology, but even when I pull up charts, so I can pull up a chart if you want as an example, but I'm not going to I don't typically sit there. I always ask the client to tell me like, number one, what is it that they're looking for? What do they want to know from me? Do they want me to go through their basic top three, their sun, their moon, their rising, and explain that to them? Do they want to know what my particular thing is predictive astrology? Do they want to know the energy that they're working with this year and how to maximize that energy? So I look at astrology as like, hey, it's a blueprint to this game that we call life. If we have a blueprint, why not use it? And if we know the general energy that we're working with, now we can game plan better and say, okay, this is where my focus is going to be. Or if it's not that, then it's confirmation that you're already focused in the right direction.
So if I'm a coaching client of yours, I can then get an astro reading with you, and that will
Yes.
enhance my coaching. Beautiful.
Yes. And then I have a client that likes to bounce back and forth. So some days you're like, hey, Natasha, let's jump into the astrology chart. And this is going to my life. Can you explain it astrologically? And I say yes. And just so you know, I also like to say not everything can be explained astrologically, but a lot of things can be.
Sure.
And then sometimes she'll come and say, well, today I just want you to coach me. I'm having a problem and this is what I want to be coached on. And so I can flip flop back and forth, no problem. And I prefer that because then now my job is not boring. I'm constantly doing something new and different versus always coaching. And then the one last thing I like to say about coaching is like for anyone that is a coach and maybe you're a new coach, maybe you haven't had training yet, we always coach the person, not the problem.
Absolutely. Well, I love it. I support everything you're doing, and I'm so excited to see where you continue to go and grow, because you always do. You're always changing and upgrading, I feel like.
Thank
So
you,
you're
Pluto.
you are so transformational. That's
Yes,
great.
transformation for sure. I think Pluto has a lot in store for all of us. As Pluto is in Aquarius right now, we're getting a sneak peek preview of Pluto in Aquarius right now. And I know some people are going to say, I can hear them in my head already, but Pluto's not a planet.
Yeah, they tried to get rid of it, didn't they?
Well, Pluto is considered a dwarf planet. And I have a dog in my arms. That's why you only see one air quote and not two air quotes. Like, so, so Pluto's a dwarf, considered a dwarf planet, even though the astronomical community, they're still hashing that out if they're going to re-promote Pluto back to a regular sized planet or not. There's apparently a lot of politics involved in the classification of Pluto. But like if we wouldn't, and I definitely heard this from another astrologer, so I'm totally stealing here. We wouldn't call a dwarf human being a non-human being,
Right.
right?
Yeah, that's a great yes.
Yeah.
100%.
Yeah. So even though Pluto is considered a dwarf planet, Pluto is still a planet. And quite frankly, if COVID didn't teach us not to fuck with Pluto, then I don't know what will teach us.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
Because Pluto had a big presence during COVID.
Yes.
Well, Coach Tash, this has been awesome. Is there anything you want to plug that's from your YouTube page or your website or anything?
Yeah. If they want to reach out to me directly, they're welcome to email me at Tash, TASH at coachtash.com. And that's the easiest way to get a hold of me. Or you're welcome to Google me, Coach Tash, and shoot me a text message.
All right. Great talking to you today. It's been so great to hear your story, all of the power all that inner strength that you have learned to embody is very inspiring. And I can't wait to start watching Letters to My Younger Self.
Thank you. Thank you for having me.
Ah, awesome. Okay, bye-bye.
Bye bye.